Thank you, Osmo. Good evening, everyone. So we're going to establish our leadership rhythm this evening. And I just want to talk, the first bit I want to explain to you is, it may sound complex, but actually I'm going to try to break it down into 3 areas. Okay, and it's about you and your belief system and the things that you have experienced through your life, through your lens, that has created the way you think about things, the way you feel about things. Is that okay? So to start this all off, as I said, 3 defining, for me, it comes down to 3 zones, if you like. I want to start with the first zone. I want to take you back and tell you a story about me growing up as a child. So I want to take you back to May the 5th, 1973. May the 5th, 1973, I was 8 years old. I grew up in Cardiff, South Wales, and there was a group of lads who every day after school used to meet and play football. And May the 5th, 1973 was slightly different because May the 5th, 1973 was a Saturday. So on a Saturday, we'd eat, we'd get up, we'd eat, we'd play football, we'd eat, we'd go to bed. Not necessarily in that order, but with just more football. And it was May the 5th, 1973 that I learned a lot about myself, but I didn't realise that until 30 years later. So I want to bounce forward now 30 years. So I'm 38-year-old, I'm coaching, and I am on a senior leadership course within sport. And there's lots of coaches around this table. And this guy who introduced me to NABS, actually, a man called John Neal. John is actually now the head of coaching at the English Cricket Board. And John was a senior lecturer at Ashridge House Business School. And I was on a program with 14 other coaches, international coaches, premiership coaches. And John bounded in the room. He's a big guy, 6'6", not quite as muscular as myself, but big guy. And the first question he said, "Who are you?" And he said, "Right, get in pairs, and for 3 minutes, talk about who you are, what you do, and then after 3 minutes, I'll shout change, and you just change back." So he said, "Number yourselves 1s and 2s." So I numbered myself a 1. I went first. Brilliant. Who am I? My name's Nigel. I've been married for 30 years. I've got 3 dependents. They used to be children. They just depend on us now. I said, I played for Bath for 16 years, played professionally, won 17 trophies, including the first team to win a European Cup. Played for England for 13 years, and I captained the British and Irish Lions on the midweek games on the 1997 tour of South Africa. "Time," said John. "Change." And we changed over, and I listened for 3 minutes. And at the end of the 6 minutes, John said, "How did you find that? 15 blokes, 3 minutes to talk about yourself. What could go wrong?" Could have been longer, but 3 minutes, nailed it. Then he said, "Okay, who are you really? Who are you really? What happens to you under pressure? What happens to you on your bad days? And where does that ability to make sense of the world come from?" And he said, "I want you to do an exercise. Get a piece of paper, draw 2 lines, an axis. On the vertical, you're going to put a positive and a minus. On the horizontal, you're going to start with 0, which is the day you were born, and put today's date in." Right, do that. Now, think about moments in your life that under pressure, or at times when you need to make decisions, or you feel something in your daily life, it takes you back to that time. And my immediate thought went back to May the 5th, 1973. I was 8 years old, like I said. And why did this day have such a big impact on me? Well, because it created this first layer I told you about, which is my plug, if you like, the thing that grounds me. So as I say, May the 5th, 1973 was a Saturday. And we met outside, we had breakfast, met outside, and a group of us would play football. And when I was young and growing up, I was overweight. I wasn't particularly athletic, and I wasn't very good at football. And the 2 best kids in the street would stand on the road, and they would pick their teams. And there was only 1 goal. And where do you think the fat kid who wasn't particularly good ended up? In goal. And every day I'd sit on the wall and hope that I'd be picked at centre forward or centre half or one of those sexy positions where you could run around and pass and shoot. And every day I was the last one picked because I wasn't very good and I was overweight. And I'd end up in goal. But I never thought about making my way to the goal. I just waited until my position was unattainable and just said, right, okay, I'm in goal. Until May the 5th, 1973. Who knows what happened on May the 5th, 1973? A special day in the calendar. Not so special now, but it used to be really big in the 70s and 80s. And before that. Saturday, May. See, that's not so big now. FA Cup final day. It was the only game of football televised live on both the BBC and the ITV. And in 1973, Leeds United, who were the best team in Europe, coached by Don Revie, played Sunderland. Sunderland, working class town from the northeast, lower division, and full of people who lived in the area. So Scotsmen and guys from the northeast. Sunderland weren't given a chance. And I was a kid growing up in Cardiff. So at 5-3 on May the 5th, 1973, we called time on our match and we all went into the house to watch the FA Cup final. And being from a working class family, a working class background, and Sunderland being the underdog, we all chose Sunderland. We all chose Sunderland for our team for the day. Even though we knew this Leeds United team were one of the best in Europe. The game kicked off and the unthinkable happened. Sunderland, through Ian Porterfield, took the early lead. And we all thought, this is where the onslaught comes. Leeds are now going to batter them. And they did. They put a lot of pressure on Sunderland. And then it happened, the defining moment in my life. Paul Reedy, who played right back for Leeds United, put a cross, a long pass, onto the head of Trevor Cherry. And in fact, instead of me telling you about it, why don't you have a look? What happened? What happened? Pardon? Sunderland won, but what happened? The goalkeeper was the hero. I'm tingling now when I'm thinking about it, honest to God. Goalkeepers can be heroes. Wow. I can be me. I don't need to be anyone else. I don't need to try and be anyone else. If I just be good at being me, maybe I'll be accepted as one of the kids in the street. Maybe I'll be valued. Maybe just I'll be credible. And that's where I learned, because these three words, authenticity, credibility, and value, kept coming back to me throughout my career, even till now. And I'll share some stories about credibility, authenticity, and value as we go, because that's my plug, that's my grounding, that's the thing that keeps my feet firmly on the ground. Because from that day, I never waited for the teams to be picked. I went in goal. And I practiced. And then I realised that, you know what? Anyone can kick a ball. Anyone can pass. Anyone can shoot. Nobody could do what I could do. Because I was the only kid in the street who could dive on concrete. And not only could I dive on concrete, I was good at diving on, and I loved it. And I realised that if I loved something enough, and I could be me, and bear in mind, there were times in my life, through the punk era, where I tried things out and it wasn't me. And I knew it wasn't me, but I tried it. And there's times in my life where I've behaved in certain ways which I haven't been particularly proud of, because going back to 73 keeps bringing me back to being authentic, being credible, being valued. And I get asked all the time now by leaders around authenticity. And because a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is you and how you change your tone, your music inside you in order to fit in with those around you or lead with those around you. And people say, but how can I remain authentic if I move or do things which aren't me? And my view there is, well, if your intention is to be better and continually grow and learn, then of course you're going to be different in 5 years' time. You'll be different now than you were 5 years ago, but you're still authentic. It's still you. You're just a better version of you. People come to sessions like this and they go, I just want to be me. And I'm thinking, well, if that's the case, why have you bothered coming? Because if you see authenticity as no change, no progress, just you as you, then why learn new things? Why learn new techniques? Why learn about others? And my views are authenticity, if it's based in the intent to develop and be better and understand, then that's authentic. And it will be uncomfortable. And you will clunk around and get things wrong. And as you learn to do things without thinking, then it becomes part of who you are. When you go from the conscious incompetence of knowing that it's a little bit clunky and not quite right to just the way you are, it's the way you behave. That unconscious competence, when you don't have to think about it. Who drives a car? Remember the time when you have to find first and you look in your mirrors? Do you still do that? You do it automatically. It becomes unconsciously competent. It's the same with your behaviour. You behave in a certain way, you see that it has benefits and value, and you get to flex, you get to move. So my first question to you is have a think about you and have a think about the things that you've experienced. And think about 3 words that are important to you. So mine are being authentic, being credible, and being valued. Are they consistent? And no, they're not. Because like I say, I learn and therefore my authenticity changes. Credible, I work in swimming and I'm not from a swimming background. So am I credible in swimming? I've found I'm credible because I don't talk about swimming. Because as soon as I talk about swimming, I lose my credibility because I know nothing about swimming or very little about swimming. But how do I do my job as a leadership, part of the leadership? I don't talk about swimming, I talk about people, I talk about growth, I talk about behaviours, I talk about team culture, I talk about working together as a team. Because that's where my credibility lies, not in the actions of swimming. Does that make sense? So what 3 words are important to you? Just have a think about it and write them down. Just have a chat with the person next to you. And think of a story that supports you with it. You've heard mine, it doesn't have to be 5 minutes long, but think of your narrative and your story and why those words mean something to you. Or it might just be 1 word. It might be compassionate, and this is why compassion is important to me. It might be drive, it might be ambition, because this happened and this is why it's important to me. Just a couple of minutes. Just have a think about 3 words that are important to you. Share your story with the person next to you. You're in the bathroom, please talk free. Okay, how are you doing? Sorry. Made you jump then, didn't I? How was that? So you had a conversation with the person next to you, and just while you're doing it, this is the type of, when you do your life script, this exercise is called life script, around periods in your life. So I was born in 1964, it's 2019. This would be the 1973 Cup final. So it was positive because I realised that I could add value by being me. So authenticity, incredible. This one is my dad started working away from home when I was about, again, probably a year later, and he never really worked at home for the next 10 to 15 years. So actually being a 9-year-old boy with an absent father, that might well be up here, but it still gave a sense of duty, so even though it was a negative at the time, the things I learned about it was to look after myself, a sense of duty, take care as the adult male in the family. Even though I was 9, 10, that feeling of responsibility for 3 older sisters, a younger brother, and a mother who, had some problems mentally. Was it at the time negative, but positive came out of it. Do you know what I mean? The way I looked at it. And so these things happened through, 2019. I'll talk about that later. Actually, 2014, that is. Negative, but a positive outcome came from it. And I'll explain that later. But does that make sense? Because when you experience these things, your body has this sort of print, this chemical imprint of something's happened to me. What does that mean to me? How do I feel about it? What do I think about it? How does that affect me going forward? How does that affect my beliefs? This might be, for instance, somebody might think as we go forward, trouble with a boyfriend, don't trust men. But the thing is, I was with somebody this morning who said to me, my lack of trust in men comes from. Now, is that a belief that is helpful? It is to her because it's very much a coping strategy. Is it helpful in decision making around future relationships? That's not for me to say, but that's how that whole thing plays out, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? So would you mind just sharing some of the thoughts in the room around your three, my 3 words to start with were authentic, credible, and valued. They're my 3-pin plug, and that's going to come into being in a second when I show you the next part. So this is the bottom layer. This is those deep beliefs. So give us a flavour of what's out there. What did you discuss? What were your stories? What were your narrative? What were your words?
Mine was, the first word was creativity.
Okay.
So just knowing, even from when I was very small as a girl, I used to be sent to like a summer art school.
Yeah.
And that just made me so happy. And even being like 4-year-old at like painting.
Yeah.
I just loved it so much. But then obviously coming into this career and digital, and you're always on emails, I just always had to find some sort of creativity, like somewhere, to sort of like fire that flame.
So even at 4, creativity made me happy. That imprint of, even as a 4-year-old, I remember being happy when I was being creative. And that's great, well, brilliant. Yeah, it brings tingles, brilliant. Big smile on your face when you talk about it. Terrific. Thank you for that. What else? Yeah. Love it. Go on. When did you first discover being curious?
Well, I'm actually thinking about, this is Nana's one, curiosity. But then actually speaking to you or listening to you, I think that some of the other words that you said, like passionate and empathetic, when you were giving me your stories, I felt like you were a very curious person. So when it came to passionate, I was talking about things that, you love and how other people are affected by how happy and joy what you are when you're talking about it. And when you do have empathy for other people, or when maybe other people's emotions affect you, you're curious about that, and you're curious about yourself. So maybe that's probably why the word curiosity is used.
Brilliant, love it. Thank you. Who else? Curious, empathetic, passionate. Just on passion, passion's an interesting one because a lot of my time is spent in the world of sport where people say they're very passionate all the time. And, you know, we're going to talk during this about what happens when our intention is to be passionate, but we just turn it up slightly. So what, too much passion might become angry. Actually, I'm really passionate. You're not really angry. But I'm passionate. I love this stuff. You're making me now, you're scaring me. You know, too much empathy. What does too much empathy look like? And people talk about, if you want to really show empathy, you know, stand in someone else's shoes. But in order to be really empathetic, remember to take yours off first, so that you don't take any of your baggage into somebody else's. But too much empathy, too much passion, we can turn them up, we can turn them down, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Anybody else to share a word that means a lot to them? Competence or confidence?
Competence.
Okay.
And the story with this is very classical from school age, like being praised publicly for doing something really well, better than others, and kind of this nice smack feeling that.
No, but the thing is, with competence comes confidence. And again, it's really interesting because if you overdo confidence, you might become smug. And we're going to look at that in a minute. You know, when you say, ooh, you know, smug, arrogant, no, actually, I'll just tone that down because I'm confident, because I can do this, and look, I can bring value to this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense, absolutely.
Thank you for that. When someone talks about being competent, there's another piece of work I do around selecting people. And which one would you select? Somebody who is competent with a poor behaviour, or somebody who is incompetent with a great behaviour and great for the team? You've got two people. One's competent, poor behaviour. One's incompetent, but great to have around. Which one do you choose? But hold on to this because we all see the world differently, and that's what we're going to move on to next. We all see the world differently, and it's all contextual. So how we see things, just because we're looking at the same thing, doesn't mean we see the same thing. And this next part of this three-tier complex state is the bit really about the music. So my 3-pin plug around authenticity, credibility, and value, bringing value to a situation. It then goes into this next part, which crikey, 15, 16 years ago, I was working at a Premier League rugby club, and I was the head of their academy. And the guy who I worked with was a guy called Gary Meakin. And Gary was a musician, and he came in one day, and he said, why is it kids, the ones he said, why is it they behave differently on different days? And I said, well, give me an example. And he said, and he named the player, he was 16 years old. He said, look, last week, brilliant. This week, I don't know where he's been. He said, he just hasn't got his head in the game. So I said, Gary, you're from music, aren't you? He said, yeah. I said, what band did you start with? He said, I started with the beat. Anybody know the beat? For those who didn't know the beat. So Gary played in the beat when it started, and then he left the beat because he got married and had a young family. Who likes the Specials? Because I think he was too young, married with a kid when you should be having fun, but perhaps he wasn't. Anyway, I said to him, think about music and think about where you put your music to start with, whether it's jazz, whether it's ska, whether it's classical, whether it's rock and roll, pop, whatever you like. Just think about the context of the music. But think about the situation this kid's in, the context he's in. And I said, just think about the things in his life which are impacting on him as a person. So tell me about him at the moment. He said he is doing his GCSEs. I said, okay, so let's think about one of these slider things. I said, in music, what are they called? He said, mixing desks or equalizers. I said, okay, think about this. Think about this lad who's got his internal equalizer. And on that equalizer, let's put exams. Where would you slide it? He said, up. I said, let's put it up. What else? He said, family. Family's putting really a lot of pressure on him at the moment. Why that? Well, because he's mixing his life between his rugby and his schoolwork. Okay, let's slide family up. What else? Friends. He's got a really strong friendship group and they're on his case as well. Let's slide friends up. And now let's look at the context of what he does here. So let's talk about his physical side. Yeah, physically he's not great in the gym. Okay, let's slide him down. What else? Well, his passing, his tackling. Okay, so technically, let's slide him down. And his head's not in the game. He just doesn't know what he's up to on the field. Tactically, let's slide him down. So I said, you've got 3 family things up, 3 work-related things down. I said, let's plug him in and see how he sounds. He said, you sound shit. I said, so how do we help him to play great music? He said, well, let's take some of the pressure, some of the load off him. And he said, that will bring down some of the time he spends with his family and his friends and his schoolwork. And it brings it into a balance. Not perfect balance, but it will move with the context. Okay, what does he sound like now? Sounds great. He said, that's really interesting. He said, there's this whole thing around music. And I said, well, the thing is, we all have context. Context changes for us all the time. But I said there will be a string of things inside us which means something to us. And how we see the context, the pressure, the perceived pressure of what we're under when we're here. So our brain is constantly telling us, is this normal, is this normal? If it's, yeah, it's normal, I can cope with this, then we're fine. You know, we're not really aroused, we're okay, daily doings. But then all of a sudden the brain will go, context changed, can I cope with this? It's a bit different now. Is it normal? No. Can I deal with it? Yeah. Wow. Peak performance. Stimulated. Let's do it. But if our head says context, is this normal? No. Can I deal with it? Well, I don't think so. Then actually we're going to behave in a completely different way. And the things that we find dear to us, we might start turning some of those things off when we start thinking about what we're doing. Am I making sense? And then we make our choices, and the music is what people see. It's our behaviours. So my analogy is that people talk about, are we in tune with each other? Are we playing to a rhythm and a beat? Do we play to the same beat? As a team, what's the rhythm? What's the heartbeat of this team? We talk about sound, and we try to relate it to how we are as a team. Now, you will have your own set of principles. These are mine. Family's important, being open, having fun, learning, supporting, and security. They're mine. But when we start to apply pressure and the context changes, then this happens. Things move. And when I was starting coaching and people said these things are fixed, I thought, I don't think they are. That's not my experience. My experience is people behave differently depending on how they see things, what context they're under. So just out of interest, where's the pressure in your work? Tell me a pressure that you are under at the moment. Exams. So with the pressure of exams, does that change your behaviour in your daily life? Because you've got deadlines to make and you've got assignments to write and you have maybe a dissertation to get done, and you've got other things going on in your life as well, which mean a lot to you, and you've got to try and get that balance right. Well, you've got to prioritise things because you feel that pressure coming on. And so how do you get things in balance? So as I say, let's start with what type of music, and how do we see the situation that we're in at the moment? Because you will all see this differently. All right, now some people may have seen this before. What do you see? A young lady, of course it's a young lady. And everybody sees the young lady. Pardon? Old lady. But it's a young lady, because the lady down here said the lady was young. Now I know it's contextual. What sort of age is young? The thing is, there's no right or wrong answer. Does everybody see the young lady? Does everyone see the old lady? Who doesn't see the young lady? Or who doesn't see the old lady? You don't see the old lady? Okay, that's fine. But the thing is that if this was a conversation and we weren't talking about young ladies, old ladies, without the art of curiosity, we can start arguing over whether the lady is young or old. But we can do that without establishing, well, what do you consider young to be and what do you consider old to be? Tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing, because then you're actually, your intention is to learn a little bit more about the person that you're maybe having this disagreement with, rather than just battering them with your point of view. Moving your position to say, well, tell me a little bit more about this person here. What age is this person? Oh, they're in their 20s. That's interesting, because my experience is the person's maybe in his 70s. Really? Tell me a little bit more about what you see. Well, I see this old lady with quite a large nose, where the head fills the screen, and the nose comes down, and the mouth, and the mouth is a young lady's necklace. Now this one might freak you out, but just shout out, when you see the cat spinning, just shout out which way you think the cat spins. Or in fact, what I'll do is I'll ask you to put your hand up if you think the cat is spinning clockwise or anti-clockwise. Some of you might have seen it before, if you've been to listen to me before. So put your hand up if the cat's spinning clockwise. And put your hands up if you think the cat's spinning anti-clockwise. Wow. Isn't that weird? Put your hands up and have a look at it. If the cat is spinning clockwise. Clockwise, have a look. Anti-clockwise. Oh, how's that? How can that possibly be right? It's spinning clockwise. No, it's spinning anti-clockwise. So let's lose our curiosity and just have an argument. Well, ultimately, it's just a cat that spins. It's just your brain playing tricks on you. But it's just a trick to suggest that whatever we see, read, hear, we will put it through our internal filters and come up with our own story about what this means to me. And our stories will be different. And why curiosity is perfect in this is to be interested in the people that you're with. Just to try and find out what they see and how they see it, and try and see what happens to your internal equalizer. So as far as equalization goes, this, as I say, these are words. So this is my plug, this is my grounding, and then the lead goes up into the context box through the perceived pressure and intention. Why is intention important? When we're working with people, why is it important to understand what their intent is? Yeah. And when someone's behaving badly, why is intention really important?
react. Because how you feel is valid, but in your reaction, you might say, no, it made me feel a certain way. I'm not going to shout at you.
Yeah. The other thing with intention, and there's a business coach called Stephen Covey who came up with a lovely quote, which is, we judge ourselves on our intention and others on the way they behave. And we don't know why they behave in that way because we don't ask what their intentions are. And sometimes they behave in a way that we don't like. And we don't know why they're behaving like that. We just judge them on their behavior. And then we say, we don't like you because you behave like this. People like you behave like this. Wow, people like me. I never thought of me like that. There's more people like me. Wow. There's a book called Turning the Ship Around by David Marquet. David Marquet was a commander of a warship in the US Navy. And he led that warship on intention. He found out what his crew intended to do, and he let them get on with it, rather than telling them what to do, because they were the experts. Anyway, these are the things that mean a lot to me. My family, I like being open. I like having fun, even though my face sometimes doesn't give that away, because I've got a pretty miserable face most of the time. I like to learn. Love is really important to me. This is really important, because that in itself will drive an awful lot of other things. And I'll tell you a story in a second. I get out of bed to help others. And security is important because I've got a family. What do you think the red dots are? Bandwidth. When I go beyond my red dot, my behaviour changes. And you'll see people go, ooh, you know. Now being 6'4" and 120 kilos, when my behaviour changes, people take notice. And so I try not to. I try to keep in balance most of the time. Because I don't want to freak people out. I don't want to drive people away. It's bad enough that I'm miserable most of the time, or look miserable. So, explanation. Why things are where they are. So, I'll tell you two stories, and I want you to come up and think about yours. In fact, I'll tell you what we'll do first. Why don't you, if you take this card, on the values mix, you've got your three which are really important, and you might find them somewhere in here when you, but just put some words that are really important to you. As I said, my grounding is being valued, authentic, and credible, and then the lead comes up into the context box, and then into this, which is my framework of, these are the things I think about in my daily business. And even under pressure, they're important to me, but sometimes I switch some of them off. So just have on the values mix, just write the words and have a go at putting where you think your bandwidth is, your tolerance. But it starts with just things that are important to you. And as I said, it might be, it can be anything, it's up to you. It can be the three words that you wrote earlier with a couple more. It's completely up to you. Just for 5 minutes, just have a go at writing. How would you describe yourself, or what's important to you, and what happens to that when the pressure comes on? And how do you respond? So just some words that are important. These are the things that are important to me. Just for 5 minutes. How you doing? Could you turn to the person next to you and just share what you've got? You don't have to, if you don't want to. But just have a conversation. Can I just ask you to do something? I'm taking a lead from the lady at the back. Can you just share a story? But when you're listening, can you be a little bit curious and say, that's really interesting. Can you tell me a bit more about why what would be your frequency be there? Where's your cutoff? Is it much? Is it reduced? Is it big? Just be curious about what the people are saying. Just for a couple of minutes each. Just share your equalizer with them, your internal equalizer. Pardon? I've got some, yeah, go on. Have some water, please. I'm going to get a crisp, actually. Well, I know where all the olives have gone.
Yes, sorry, Annabelle remembers the beat.
My dad
young
stole
talent.
that album from the local record shop in our hometown, and then he got it home and there was no record in it.
Oh, gutted. Someone had nicked it before him.
He does never prosper. This is brilliant.
Gary went on to play in Soul Survivor after the beat.
See, don't know that. I probably know the music.
I didn't know them. But you used to play with Edwin Starr
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
We used to play, so he used to live in the Midlands. And he used to get, because in the sort of 60s, 70s and 80s, there was a whole load of bands from ELO to the Specials to...
They were all from the Midlands.
They were all from that...
Yeah,
Yeah, Wolverhampton.
Coventry was specials.
Coventry was Specials, the Beat were Birmingham.
I've seen specials 4 times.
But even rock bands like Def Leppard from, I believe, are from...
Yes. Yeah.
So Ozzy Osbourne, I think, is Birmingham.
Yes, he is. Yeah, his accent's
It's full on rock accent.
I'm trying to think. We went to see Jules Holland one evening, which was all very nice, and then the next evening we went to a specials, and there were middle-aged blokes sort of squaring up to each other, pretending that they were sort of 16 again.
I get invited back to... So I played at Bath, and I get invited back to what they call Legends. I refuse to go. Because it's...
Oh, you were you played, yeah.
I played for Bath for a long time, and I'm like, no thank you. The first one they had, it was all, people were phoning me up saying, the people you play with were maniacs. I went, that's why I didn't come. Because they were maniacs then when they were in their 20s and 30s, and now they're in their 50s and 60s, and they still think they can behave in the same way. But someone said, but there was a full-on fight where one of the old boys started having a right go at one of the younger. I'm like, I know, but why do you think I don't come back? I've done with all that.
I sort of knew you were there, but you didn't make me jump.
I thought I'd let you finish your picture, and then, no, I'm fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was just aware you were going to turn back on any second, but
No, I'm going to start now. Okay, just bring it back. Just share how that was. Can you just give us a flavour of the conversations you're having around the words that are important to you, and what happens to them when you're under pressure? What do you notice about some of these behaviours that you have, and what's actually behind them? What changes? When the context is turned up or down, how does that affect your mood, your behaviour? What did you notice? Give us a flavour of the narrative in the room. Come on. Share.
One of mine was comfort.
Comfort?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess it's tying into
Yep.
If I don't feel comfortable in the situation, then I feel myself becoming more irritable.
Yep.
Which means I'm shorter with people and have less time to help people, or even probably put full effort into a task.
And when do you start to notice when you're uncomfortable? Where do you feel it?
Right now.
But is it in your stomach? Is it in your head? Is it I think I'm uncomfortable, or is it I'm feeling uncomfortable?
Feeling uncomfortable.
Okay.
Yeah. Overall sensation.
Because sometimes what happens is I feel uncomfortable, therefore my head's now taking me back to times where I felt uncomfortable in the past, and I know what comes next. I'm going to be a bit short with somebody. But recognising it and then bringing yourself back into balance. So it might be, do you know what, I just need to go for a walk, or I need to go to the gym, or I just need to move myself from this position because I'm not feeling comfortable. And be open about it. Does that make sense?
I guess then, how do you do it without hurting the other person's feeling? Like, if you're there talking to someone and they're making you feel uncomfortable, and it's like, I just need to remove myself from the situation.
Well, no, but you can say, actually, this conversation is making me feel uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think I'm brave enough to do that.
Okay, but that's really interesting what you said then, because comfort and brave work together. Who said they were honest? Who thinks they're honest? And who thinks honesty is an important word? Are you always honest? I did this the other day. I said, this guy said to me, honesty, I'm always honest. I said, you're always honest? He said, yes. He said, I am always honest. I said, wow. I said, can you think of a time when you weren't honest? And he said, yes. And someone in the room said, crikey, that was quick. And I went, you know. And so how many of you are honest? Yeah, like to be. Our intention, remember, intention is to be honest. How many of you who said you were honest are compassionate? Do you think you can be honest without compassion? There's a nod. You can be honest without compassion?
Yeah, sometimes my honesty isn't compassionate.
But sometimes, depending on the context you're in, and dependent on maybe the pressure you're under, then sometimes your honesty might be, I have told you enough times now, and I'm not telling you anymore. All right, we've had this conversation, so now I'm just going to tell you straight. Or, how many of you... So all of a sudden, compassion drops and honesty comes to the forefront. You know, how many of you ask permission to be honest? Can I be honest with you? I'm like, no. Can you lie to me like you normally do? Particularly when my wife's concerned. Nigel, I want to be honest. I went, no, just lie to me. It's much easier. And I feel far more comfortable when you do. Say again?
When people say, if I'm honest.
Yeah, if I'm honest, well, that would suggest that you're not most of the time. Do you know what I mean? And what's happened to the context to say, if I'm honest, are you now under pressure where you think, look, I've been quiet for a bit here now, so yeah, look, I've just got something, I want to be honest with you. Well, why haven't you said that earlier? Well, I didn't want to upset anyone. Oh, okay, so now we're really in the shit, your honesty comes out. Eh? Why didn't you say that earlier? And this is really interesting. I don't trust you. I don't know what people would have said if I said that a week ago when I first thought it. And this is where we get really into some terrific conversations around the teams you work in. Because what's holding you back from having that conversation if your intention is for the best of the team? I have this all the time around trust. I just don't trust you. I didn't know what you do last week, but now we're desperate. I thought it was time I shared this information with you. Wow. Now it's not about, oh, you keep the cards close to your chest. No, actually it's about trust. So how do we develop trust? Because trust will go up and down, depending on people's actions, people's conversations, people's ability to take advantage of someone else's vulnerability. where someone's honest with somebody and they use that honesty and use it against them. Trust goes out the window. And if you hold trust like that in your life script, where in the past I've shared things with people and they've used it against me, then you ain't going to be trusting very quickly. And that itself can be pretty difficult with a team. Anybody got anything else?
This one of mine was caring. Because when things are going well and the context is good, I can be that person that remembers someone's birthday or ask someone how their interview went and check they're okay. That feels good. But when like the pressure's on, stress is in the way, I forget things like that, and I won't be as caring. I won't bring my gran like I normally do. And then I feel really guilty, and then it gets
Caring and guilt.
Face it, yeah.
Caring's good, guilt's okay. Context changes, caring goes down, guilt goes up. Yeah. Behaviour now, I'm thinking, oh, crikey, energy's gone, I feel guilty. That then affects other things that I do. Do you see how this works? That nothing exists in isolation, in our feelings, in our thoughts. So can I just share some of my stories, just to give a bit of context to it? So these are the things that I like to think, and they'll change. They'll change as I get older. They'll change through life. Remember, authenticity, growth, getting better. They weren't. I probably, before I had a family, did I care? No, because I didn't have children. But if relationship was on there, yeah, that's really important to me. But this is me at the moment. So a couple of stories, and just to highlight how it works. Where shall I start? Shall I start with? Let's start with the first. Do you mind if I swear? No. I personally don't swear. My wife does swear, and I need to quote my wife. So in 2007, I used to work for England Rugby, and England got to the final of the World Cup. Hooray! And they played South Africa. Hooray! Just like they did 3 weeks ago. And in the final against South Africa, Mark Cueto, who's the left wing for England, was running down the wing, and literally the skin on his left little toe touched the white line. And he scored a try which he thought he legitimately scored, and the touch judge and the referee had a conference and they disallowed it. They said he was in touch. So England didn't win the World Cup. South Africa did, again. 2007. Now they were coached by a guy called Brian Ashton. And Brian was in his 60s. He was my coach when I first started, when I was an 18-year-old. I learned loads from him. He was a teacher, he was a coach, he was a mentor, he was a guru. If you don't know Brian Ashton, how many of you know Star Wars? Yeah? Think of Brian, think of Yoda. Brian is about 4 foot, he's about 300 years old, he wears a hood and a cloak, and he's very wise. And the RFU, my employer, had sacked Brian. And I went home and I said to my wife, I'm going to resign. And she said, really, why? I said, the RFU, my employer, has sacked Brian Ashton. My love for Brian was high, my support for Brian was high. I'm going to resign. And my wife said, that's really interesting. Before you hand your notice in, remember, you have 3 children and a mortgage to pay. So why don't you put your values in the bin and get back to fucking work? I said, yes, dear, I'll send Brian a card. But my wife changed the context, she changed the narrative, she changed the story, and what did she bring back into life? Security and family. I wasn't thinking about security and family when I was going to support Brian, because support and love for Brian were the things that were really in my mind. I was out of balance. My behaviour was irrational. She just brought these 2 things which were dear to me back into life. So family, security. Think of these. After 10 years of working at the rugby union and working with some of the best coaches in Britain, I was working with Premiership coaches, people who coach every Saturday, and I was talking to them about my principles and my philosophies, because I believe in that. And they said, Nige, you can talk about principles, you can talk about philosophies, but do you know, you've been away from the coalface for too long. And you don't know what it's like to work in an environment when you're 2 defeats from the sack. What do you think they were questioning in my plug? Credibility. my ability to bring value to them. So on my 10th anniversary, we had a box in Twickenham where my colleagues came and we celebrated my 10 years of service for the rugby union, where they put my pension up and they put my holiday pay up, and I repaid them by handing in my notice. And I went to work for a club in the Premiership that sacks its coaches because I needed credibility. I needed to be authentic, and I needed to add value to the people who I was supporting, because support is really, really important to me. And I coached at this club. And eventually we did okay with the group of players we had. Hey, you know, we scored more tries than we'd ever scored before, and that was part of my role. You know, all the things that I was asked to do, I delivered on. The numbers were great. And at the end of the season, the head coach was sacked, and the new head coach came in and he sacked me. And I was credible, I was authentic, and I was unemployed. But even better than that, because my salary had gone up, me and my wife decided to build the extension on the back of the house that we'd been waiting for 10 years because of extra money in the account. And we had builders in, and I was unemployed. And I saw our bank balance drop and drop and drop until we were one mortgage payment away from defaulting. This one here used to be down here. And now I need to work. And my behaviour changes when I'm not working, because security now means an awful lot to me. I asked my family whether I could go and work. They said, great. Go and work in the Premiership. Brilliant. They were really behind me. Massive. I felt supported. I felt loved. What happened, the result was, all went south. And it did affect me. Affected me massively. And would I have had it any other way? Absolutely not. Because I learned loads. Learning is also really important to me. I didn't think I'd learned it at the time, but on reflection, my life script, you know, when I come back to this, (2014), sacked, no longer employed. It was negative at the time, but a huge positive to me going forward. Massive. Helped me with my credibility and authenticity go back down there. Does that make sense to you? And you will all have your narrative. You will all have your story about why these words at this moment in time are important to you, and what happens to them when you're under pressure, how you feel uncomfortable, and then you think about things and all of a sudden your behaviour changes. Any questions? Yes? That's all right. I'm authentic and I'm open. But it's important to me. If I can help your learning, I love it. To support you by sharing, and then I can pay my family. If that makes sense. But the problem I have, and this is what we're going to do next, is if I put my family too, I might never leave home. Because my support for my family, again, perspective. I need to support my family by going out to work. But their version, their perception of father, dad, husband might be I need to be more home more. So how do I balance that? How do I balance work-life? Love. Before I retired from rugby, right, I went to, I sort of connected myself to an employment agency because I didn't know what I was going to do when I retired, and I didn't want to be known as the rugby player. You know, I was more than that. I was a person. I had a background. You know, I used to work in the building industry. So I enrolled in an employment agency. I didn't tell them I was a professional rugby player. I just gave them my qualifications as an electrician, electrical engineer, told them my previous experience, and then said, right, you know, I've had a bit of sales experience, so, and he got me some interviews. It was great. And I had one interview, and I was still playing professionally. I was just exploring what was out there. And the sales director said, we love your personality. We'd like you on board. I said, oh, great. And he said, here's my card. We'll phone you Monday. You may have to come back for another interview. or another chat with the senior leadership group. But you're the person I think we're looking for. I was like, oh, okay. He said, here's my card, here's my home number at the back. Brilliant. Took his number. Monday, I didn't hear anything, so I rang him at home. He said, why are you ringing me at home? Well, you gave me your number. Oh. I said, why didn't you invite me for a second interview? Now, on the way out of his office the previous week, he said, would you mind filling out the psychometric before you leave? I said, what's a psychometric? He said, it's a personality profile, and all of our candidates have to fill one out. He said, remember your psychometric? I said, yeah, I do. I did it when I left the building. He said, your psychometric didn't align to your interview. I said, oh, really? I said, what was different? He said, your psychometric suggested that you weren't competitive. Oh, no, that's really interesting. He said, oh, you're interested? I said, yeah. He said, why are you so interested? I said, well, because I'm a professional sportsman. I played for Bath for 16 years, and I've just come back from a British and Irish Lions tour where I was captain of the midweek team when we won the series against the world champions. He went, oh, do you think we need to change our psychometric? And this is where it came down to. I went, no, you're spot on. I've just learned something. And he went, what have you learned? I said, if you want me to be competent and do stuff, I've got to be passionate. I've got to love it. If I don't love it, I don't care about it. If I don't care about it, I can prioritise something else. And even now, I'm doing a course at Henley Business School, at part of Reading University. And before we got on the course, we did a strength finder. And my strengths are collaboration, and and my lowest is perseverance. And they were like, that's really interesting. And I said, it's not to me. I'm not going to persevere with something because love was right at the top. Love, determination, love, determination, what else was up there? There's a load of good stuff at the top. But perseverance is right down the bottom. And I'm like, look, love and perseverance are linked to me. If I don't love something enough, I ain't going to persevere with it. I'll just let it go, as the song goes. And I'm not going to sing it. Does that make sense? Any questions? I want you to experiment with something just for a couple of minutes. See this bit here? This here. I want to show you something. Because I really like, and what really gets me going is when people start using words. Because I'll say, well, what does that mean to you? So when someone says honest, I say, how honest? And they go, oh, really honest. And I say, you always honest? And they go, no. Oh. So what happens when you're not honest? And what happens if you're too honest, without compassion? Do people just think you've got some sort of problem? That you just blurt things out? Or what happens if we're too compassionate? So what I want you to do is this. And this, actually, some people find this incredibly difficult to name behaviours. So, in the heart of Blue Peter, I'm going to do one I thought of earlier, because otherwise we could be here all night. But this is just for you to consider, all right? So if a core quality is your ability to plan, all right? This is just an example. So if you think you're a really, really good planner, what does too much planning look like to other people? Yeah, rigid. Happy? Positive opposite of rigid is flexible. Too much flexible. Chaos. Our desire, our intention is to be planned. Our challenge is, can we be planned and move and be flexible as the context changes? Some people, because they don't see planned, they see rigid. And what freaks people who are planned out? Chaos. They are so close. our intention may be to move across here. But what happens is, we fall off the tightrope. Our intention is to be planned, people see us rigid. Our intention is to be flexible, people see us chaotic. And those are the pitfalls and the allergies that can haunt us if we don't get the context and our behaviour right. And it's a fine balance. Does that make sense? You're looking at me like, I'm not sure. Oh. So just for a couple of minutes, think about something that you think that you're good at and put it in that top left-hand corner. What would that look like if you dialed it up and was like a super strength gone mad? What do people see then? You know, I'm really good at planning. No, you are rigid. You do not plan. There is no... And I'd like to be more flexible. Yes, because you are rigid. The context changes and you just stick to the plan. Does that make sense? Just have a little go with yours. Just for a couple of minutes and then we'll wrap up. Them, it ain't easy. You know what? You know that something really annoys you, but you may not be able to put a name on it. So you know when someone says, I'm really planned, and you go, no, but when you're rigid, you really freak me out. Or, I'm really flexible. I can plan and I'm flexible. No, you're rigid and you're chaotic. Everything you do leads to chaos. Well, what did you choose?
Overbearing. Put empathy and you put caring.
All right.
Really bizarre.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? So too much overbearing. So the positive opposite of overbearing is freedom. So the tightrope you walk is between freedom and empathy.
Yeah.
Where
What,
sometimes, well, I don't know. It's
Yeah. As in, I don't know what that actually means.
what empathy.
And in terms of like these are the things
Ah.
I give to people every day. Or
Empathy. What's your version of empathy? How would you describe empathy?
as in like putting myself in someone else's shoes,
Okay.
thinking I know what they're thinking,
Now then.
which is maybe not I don't know.
But this is where it's difficult. So if you do too much thinking what other people are thinking,
Yeah.
what would you call that? Is that overbearing or is that something else? If you overthink what people are thinking without having the conversation,
Yeah. Oh, I see. So my people should be overthinking.
maybe.
Okay, I'm going to change it.
Well, no, I'm just, but it's an interesting conversation.
Opposite of overthinking.
Be more relaxed. So, chilling out. If you're not content.
So therefore you've got content at one end of that continuum and empathetic at the other. So content with you, empathetic, good with others. With you, with others. That they may work, but then too much contentment could be. But do you see how you might be seen by others? If you dial up or dial down those behaviours, you may want to be empathetic and content, but what you show is overbearing and passive. Does that make sense? So somebody might describe you, if you know, you might describe yourself as empathetic, somebody else might describe you as a little bit overbearing. Your intention is to be empathetic, but people might see something different. And also dependent on the context and your intention. How are you doing? We've got 4 minutes left. Any show and tell? Anybody got to share?
I can do mine.
Go on, then. We got a volunteer at the front who's got a mouthful of sandwich. That was a bit rude of me. Sorry.
I put it as a core quality giving feedback.
Okay.
It's something I think is really valuable and I like doing it.
Yeah.
I think the pitfall is that it can come across sometimes a bit harsh
Okay.
or like overly generous or like overly honest.
So overly critical as well.
Yeah.
Feedback. Too much feedback. You know.
Overly critical, I think it's true.
Okay. And what's the positive opposite?
Oh, I've actually done that incorrectly. I said closed, but I think it's probably more like balanced
Okay.
rather than closed. But I
That
think
works.
you
Balance
can
is good.
do it.
Balance is great. Yeah. So you've got feedback. Too much feedback is critical. Positive opposite.
Closed, but I think balance anyway.
Balanced. Too much balance.
I think distrust or I think misconception. So I think if you don't always know what people are thinking and they're not always giving their feedback, I think sometimes
Yeah.
it's difficult to trust knowing what people think.
Okay. Mistrust. So the thing is, your intention is to give feedback in a balanced way, and sometimes you can be seen to be overcritical or mistrusting. So your intention is noble, but what people see is something slightly different to what your intention is. Thank you. Does that make sense? Just to give you a little bit, you know, if you ever do a 360 feedback and you think you're really good at giving feedback and someone says, you know, you're a little bit too critical, it's like, well, that's not my intention. My intention is to give you feedback and be honest and compassionate because I really want to see how you grow. And this is something which I think is really important to you. Yeah, but I think it's a bit critical because, in fairness, it's just one thing after the other and nothing ever seems to be good enough. Yeah, but it's just feedback. It's just information. You know, ooh, you're a bit touchy now. I won't give you any more. Right, fine. And all of a sudden it's about me, not them. Does that make sense? It's about how I'm reflecting because my intention is noble and you're criticising me. I don't like that. So rather than say you don't react well to feedback, think about how do I give feedback? And do I give feedback enough? And it's now about me and my balance rather than the people around me. Does that make sense? So how do I operate my behaviour? I'm getting feedback back and I'm the one who's, oh, you're a bit rude now. Anybody else? Yes.
And so I put one of my core qualities as one of my qualities is hard working.
Yes. Too much hard work leads to burn out.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But I put the pitfall, working hard, not smart.
Yeah.
Positive opposite, I put time efficient.
Yeah.
So you can be a bit more efficient.
With your time, absolutely.
And like have fun.
Yeah.
The too much of that is lazy.
Yeah. So again, your balance is between work and life, but there's somebody, well, where are you? He's playing football. Play football. You know, or he's having a day off. Just getting a balance. Making sure that when he's in, he's fully on board. He's energetic and his energy is guided because he's resourced. Because we're saying we need to look after our people. Brilliant. Like that. So that's 8 o'clock, so I'm going to finish there with 2 out of the 3 levels. I'm just going to whet your appetite by not showing you the 3rd. But you've actually touched on it. All right, because once you understand what your grounding is and you understand the things that are important to you, and these will change, you get your intent right or understand intention, perception, choice, behaviour. The next one then is, it goes into another, if you like, area of balance, which is around coaching. And then you really do start to think about, when I'm under pressure, I'm behaving a certain way, do I choose to be direct or choose to empower the people around me? Do I take a pragmatic approach or a creative approach? Do I focus on the team, or do I focus on the individual, or do I focus on me? Under pressure, do I go risky or no risk? Do I talk more, or do I listen? Am I planned or adaptive? And am I confrontational or avoidance? And the thing is, on the back of you will have your own. Because again, these change. But this is how, again, how pressure and your perception of pressure and the way you behave and the way you think affects then the way you act. Okay, and I'm going to leave it there. All right, because this one we'll do at another time. But I think it's a 3-level complex. It starts with your plug or your 3 words, 3 things that mean, and it can be 5 words. It can be what really is important to you, that grounding, that bit of life script, and what has happened to me during my life, which has made me be the person I am and think the way that I do and feel the way that I do. And then what happens under pressure, and what happens to my balance, and how, if I'm feeling out of balance, can I get back in balance? Think about your playlist. What music do you have in your head when you're really on flow, and what happens to it when you're off flow, and what does that sound like? And what happens when we all work together, and what music does that sound like, and how do we play in tune with each other, and how do I move my internal balance to make sure that I can play nice with others? Thank you very much for listening and for taking part.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us and some of the key points that were taken today. There were loads there. A few that I jotted down from the talk are how we understand context and pressure is really important, and how it can affect the way that we think and feel. Understanding the relationship between intentions and the way that we behave. And what actually happens when we get that balance in our thinking, and the great music that we can play internally and together. There's some food for thought there. As Nigel mentioned, I think we've got some playlists that you can send in to us and let us know what you'll be playing. So a few little things before you go. We're going to be emailing a feedback form to you. Please, if you can, take the time to fill it out. The reason we can put on great speakers like Nigel and talks like this is because we're hearing what you want to hear from our speakers and what you valued. We've also got our 2020 calendar going up, some talks are already up, going up in the next few weeks, so please have a look at that, share it with friends as well. If it's not something that's necessarily an interest of you, but someone that will really benefit from it, please let them know. It's all about the community part of what NABS do. And really, finally, Hoster Scope, again, thank you so much for hosting today. And I think Nigel deserves one more round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Good.